Before we dive into this incredible true story of heroism and compassion, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next inspiring Hollywood tales. These are the stories they don't always tell. Let's go. It was supposed to be just another day on the set of a classic Western film. The sun blazed over the dusty desert lot, cameras rolled, and the cast performed their lines with the polish of seasoned professionals. But then, in a split second, everything changed. A stuntman fell from a horse, hard. The crack of his body hitting the ground echoed across the set like a gunshot. What happened next wasn't scripted, wasn't rehearsed, and wasn't what anyone expected. A Hollywood icon who'd spent decades being the life of every party suddenly became the calm force that saved a man's life. Dean Martin, known for his smooth voice and easy smile, revealed a side of himself that few people ever got to witness. In that moment of crisis, when a man lay dying on the dirt, one legend stepped up. And another legend, John Wayne, would later call him a hero for what he did. This is the story of how compassion trumped ego on a Hollywood set, and how real heroism looks when nobody's watching. At first, the golden age of Hollywood. It was 1960, the golden age of Hollywood. Western films were king, and the biggest names in entertainment were out in the desert making them. The movie was called Rio Bravo, a classic Western that would go down in history as one of the greatest films ever made. John Wayne, the Duke himself, was the star. He was in his 50s but still commanded a presence that made every person on set stand a little straighter. Dean Martin was there too, playing a supporting role as Dude, a former deputy sheriff. The two men weren't exactly best friends, but they respected each other's craft. Wayne was the serious, stoic cowboy. Martin was the charming entertainer with the quick wit and the golden voice that had made him famous across America. The stuntman nobody noticed. Then there was Cliff Lyons. Most people on set didn't know his name. He wasn't famous. He didn't get top billing. Cliff was a stuntman, one of the many brave souls who did the dangerous work that the stars wouldn't or couldn't do. He performed the falls from horses, the fights that looked too real, the risky jumps that made audiences gasp in their theater seats. Cliff Lyons wasn't just any stuntman. He was legendary in the industry, respected by every director and actor who'd worked with him. But he was invisible to the public. Nobody knew his face. Nobody asked for his autograph. In 1960, stuntmen were treated like they were less important than the stars they helped make famous. They made good money, sure, but they were expendable. When a stuntman got hurt, there was always another one waiting to take his place. That's how the industry worked back then. Cliff was in his 40s, a family man with a wife and kids at home. He was experienced, careful, and professional. He'd done hundreds of dangerous stunts without serious injury. But he was also aware that every time he climbed on a horse or prepared for a dangerous jump, he was risking his life. The pay was good enough to justify the risk. For his family, he told himself. For his family, it was worth it. The scene that changed everything. The scene being filmed that day was supposed to be straightforward. Cliff would ride a horse across the desert location, perform a specific stunt that had been rehearsed multiple times, and everyone would move on to the next shot. It was hot. The desert was over 100 degrees. The crew had been working since sunrise. Everyone was tired, thirsty, and ready for the day to be over. The lights were set up, the cameras were rolling, and John Wayne was positioned for his close-up. "Action," the director called out. Cliff kicked his horse into motion. The animal galloped toward the camera, moving fast but controlled. Cliff had done this exact stunt 100 times before. But sometimes, accidents don't care about experience or preparation. The moment everything went wrong, the horse suddenly reared. Maybe it was startled by something. Maybe the heat was getting to the animal. Maybe it was just bad luck. Whatever the reason, the horse bucked violently, and Cliff was thrown. He fell hard, really hard. His body twisted in the air, and when he hit the ground, he didn't bounce or roll with the trained technique that stuntmen practice. He landed wrong. Everyone on set heard the sickening sound of impact, that terrible crack that echoes in your nightmares. For a moment, everything froze. Cliff didn't get up. He didn't move at all. He lay there on the hot desert dirt, completely still. "Cut! Cut!" the director yelled, but his voice sounded distant, unreal. The entire set erupted into controlled chaos. People started running toward the fallen stuntman. Crew members who'd been relaxed just seconds ago suddenly moved with urgency and fear. The reality of the injury. As people gathered around Cliff, the severity of the situation became immediately clear. He wasn't moving. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle. Someone checked for a pulse. He was alive, but barely conscious. His breathing was shallow and irregular. One of the assistant directors radioed for an ambulance, but the desert location was 30 minutes away from the nearest hospital. In 1960, there was no helicopter rescue. There were no cell phones to call for emergency help faster. There was just a man lying in the dirt, seriously injured, and a wait that felt like it might never end. Cliff's eyes were open, but they weren't focused. He seemed to be slipping in and out of consciousness. His breathing was labored. The crew members around him looked at each other with the kind of fear that comes when you know someone might be dying right in front of you. The moment of truth. John Wayne pushed through the crowd and knelt down beside Cliff. The Duke was used to playing heroes, but this wasn't a movie. This was real. Even Wayne, with all his experience and authority, looked shaken. He could see that Cliff was in serious trouble. Most of the stars and important people on set began drifting away. There was nothing they could do. Some headed to their air-conditioned trailers. Others started making calls, preparing for the inevitable production shutdown. The insurance companies would need to be contacted. Lawyers would get involved. The shoot would be delayed. But Dean Martin didn't leave. While the important people dispersed, while the powerful figures on set retreated to comfort, Dean Martin walked toward Cliff Lyons with a calmness that seemed almost impossible. He wasn't dressed for the heat. He still wore his costume from the film. His hair was perfectly styled, his makeup still in place from the morning shoot. Most people on set didn't notice what he did next because they were too busy panicking or protecting themselves. Dean knelt down beside the injured stuntman. He looked at Cliff's face and saw not a nameless worker, not someone less important than himself, but a human being in crisis. A man who had a family. A man who might not survive the next 30 minutes without help. The unexpected hero. What Dean Martin did in the next 30 minutes wasn't dramatic. Nobody was filming it. There were no cameras capturing the moment. But it was the most important thing that happened on that set all day. He sat with Cliff. He monitored his breathing. He kept talking to him, keeping him awake, keeping him focused on something other than the pain. He wiped the sweat from Cliff's forehead and tried to keep him cool in the brutal heat. When Cliff's breathing became more labored, Dean adjusted his body position, keeping his airways open. He used techniques he probably learned somewhere, or maybe it was just instinct and compassion guiding his hands. 30 minutes might not sound like a long time, but when someone is dying in front of you, when every breath they take might be their last, 30 minutes feels like an eternity. Dean Martin stayed there the entire time. He talked to Cliff. He told him about his family. He told him about the people who loved him and needed him to fight, to stay with them. He made Cliff promise, silently, with his eyes, that he wouldn't give up. Other crew members watched, and something shifted in how they saw Dean Martin. He wasn't the entertainer anymore. He wasn't the guy known for his drinking and his jokes and his smooth voice. He was something else entirely. He was human. He was kind. He was brave in the way that matters most, brave in the face of real suffering. The arrival. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics moved quickly. They secured Cliff carefully, checking for spinal injuries, stabilizing him for transport. But because of what Dean had done, keeping him awake, keeping his airways open, keeping him calm, Cliff's condition was stable enough for the journey to the hospital. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Cliff's eyes found Dean's. There was a moment of connection, a moment of gratitude that didn't need words. The unexpected news. Everyone on set assumed the worst. This kind of fall, this kind of injury, people didn't walk away from it in 1960. They went to the hospital and didn't come home, or they came home changed, paralyzed, broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. But Cliff Lyons was not everyone. 2 days later, word came from the hospital. Cliff had suffered multiple broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and serious internal bruising. By all rights, he should have been in much worse condition. He should have been in a coma. He should have been dead. But he was awake. He was conscious. He was going to live. The doctors were amazed. They told his family that the way he'd been cared for in those crucial 30 minutes, the way his breathing had been monitored, the way he'd been kept calm and focused, had made the difference between life and death. If he'd been left alone, if panic had set in, if he'd lost consciousness and stopped fighting, Cliff had survived because someone had cared enough to stay. The revelation. When John Wayne heard what Dean Martin had done, something changed in how he saw the younger actor. Wayne was old Hollywood, the kind of man who believed in strength and toughness and the image you projected to the world. But he also believed in real courage, and he recognized it when he saw it. John Wayne walked up to Dean Martin on set and did something that shocked everyone who witnessed it. He shook his hand. But it wasn't just a shake, it was respectful, almost reverential. "What you did for that boy," Wayne said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "That took real guts. That's not something they teach you in acting class. That's character. That's the kind of man I respect." In 1960 Hollywood, that was a massive statement. John Wayne was declaring Dean Martin a hero. Not for a movie role, not for a performance, but for being human when it mattered most. The media doesn't know yet. Interestingly, the press never really got the full story. Oh, they reported that Cliff Lyons had been injured on set. They mentioned the accident and the hospitalization. But they didn't know about Dean staying with him. They didn't know about the 30 minutes that changed everything. Dean Martin didn't tell them. He didn't publicize what he'd done. He didn't use it to build his image or create a narrative about himself. He just did the right thing and moved on. But the people on set knew. The crew knew. John Wayne knew. And Cliff Lyons, recovering in his hospital bed with his family around him, knew exactly who had saved his life. What this story really means. Years later, Cliff Lyons recovered fully. He went back to stunt work. He continued his career doing the dangerous, invisible work that few people appreciated. He had grandchildren and great-grandchildren who got to know him because of what happened that day in the desert. He lived another 20 years after that accident. Those were 20 years with his family. 20 years of memories that wouldn't have existed if a famous actor hadn't decided that a stuntman's life mattered as much as his own. Dean Martin never made a big deal about it. He was known for many things: his incredible voice, his talent as an entertainer, his charm and wit. But among the people who worked with him, he was known for something else too. He was the kind of man who saw people, really saw them, even when the world told him they were invisible. The timeless lesson. This story teaches us something that we desperately need to remember in our world today. It's a lesson about respect. It's a lesson about seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their status or their job or how famous they are. Dean Martin was at the top of his profession. He could have walked away from Cliff's accident and nobody would have blamed him. It wasn't his job to help. It wasn't his responsibility. But he understood something fundamental, that a human life is a human life, and when someone is suffering, your rank or status doesn't matter. John Wayne, the legendary tough guy, recognized real heroism. Not the kind you do for cameras or for publicity, but the kind you do because it's the right thing to do. The reflection we all need. How many times do we walk past someone in need and tell ourselves it's not our problem? How many times do we assume that someone else will help, so we don't have to? How many times do we see invisible people, the people who do the work nobody notices, and treat them as less important? The real lesson of Dean Martin's action isn't that he was special. It's that he was human, and he chose to act like it when it mattered most. Cliff Lyons was a brave man. He risked his life for his work, just like thousands of stuntmen do every year. But he was invisible to the world. He didn't have the power or the fame to demand respect. He had to earn it through his actions, just like everyone else. Dean Martin had all the power and fame. He could have used it to protect himself, to distance himself from the crisis. Instead, he used it to connect with someone who had nothing, and in doing so, he became more of a hero than any character he ever played on screen. The real story. This is why this story matters. Because it happened in a world without social media, without instant viral fame, without incentives to publicize every good deed. Dean Martin saved a man's life and didn't turn it into a brand-building opportunity. He just did it because it was right. And isn't that the kind of person we should all try to be? Not someone who does good things for recognition, but someone who does them because another person needs help, and we have the capacity to provide it. John Wayne called Dean Martin a hero that day. But really, Dean was just being human. And perhaps that's the most important kind of heroism there is. Mobile phone with arrow, the call to action. If this story about real compassion and real heroism inspired you, I want to hear from you. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next incredible true stories from Hollywood's golden age and beyond. These are the moments that define character. These are the stories that remind us what it means to be truly great. Asterisk, asterisk. Turn on those notifications. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed someone step up and do the right thing, even when nobody was watching? Your story matters too. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Asterisk, asterisk.